a werewolf romance written by Olivia Smith. Continuation of She Takes Beatings Every Day to Protect the Name Hidden in Her Blood. There is a difference between surviving and living, and I did not understand it until I crossed the mountain pass and saw the Ashbourne lands spread gold below me in the early light. Surviving is what you do when the ground is the safest place you know. Living is what begins the moment you realize you are allowed to want more than the ground. I had been surviving for 11 years. I was 22 years old and I did not know yet what living felt like, what it tasted like, what it cost, what it asked of you in the quiet hours when no one was watching, and you finally had to decide who you were going to be, now that the thing you had been running from had stopped chasing you. I was about to find out, and the answer, like all the answers that matter, would not arrive the way I expected. It would arrive the way he had arrived, through the dark without announcement, moving with the absolute certainty of something that has only one direction left to travel. Chapter 11. The Road to Ashbourne. The journey took 4 days. 4 days of mountain roads and silver forest, and the specific silence of a large escort, moving with practiced efficiency through terrain it knew well. I had never traveled like this, with people whose job was to make sure I arrived safely, with a horse beneath me that had been chosen for steadiness rather than speed, with food appearing at rest stops without me having to ask or earn it. Every small comfort landed strangely, the way light lands strangely in a room that has been dark for a long time, not unwelcome, just requiring adjustment. I spent the first day mostly watching. The escort was 8 wolves, 4 men, 4 women, all bearing the ash gray and deep green of Ashbourne colors on their gear. They moved with the easy competence of people who trusted each other completely, and they treated me with a respectful formality that I did not know what to do with. Not deference exactly, more like recognition, as though they had been briefed on who I was and had decided, each of them individually, that the briefing warranted a specific quality of care. Calum rode beside me for the first part of the morning, and then fell back to consult with the escort's lead rider, a woman named Sable, who had the kind of face that had been weathered into pure function. Sharp eyes, minimal expression, clearly the person everyone in this group deferred to on matters of practical decision-making. I watched him talk to her and noticed the way he operated with the people around him, not commanding with the kind of dominating volume I associated with Doran Voss, but with a quality of attention that made the person he was speaking with feel like the most important source of information in the current moment. He listened more than he directed. When he did direct, it was concise. The people around him responded not with the tight, careful obedience of people who feared consequences, but with the relaxed efficiency of people who genuinely trusted the mind-making decisions. I filed that away without entirely knowing why. On the second day, he rode beside me again and we talked, really talked for the first time, without the urgency of crisis organizing every word. He asked me about Marnes Hollow, about my mother, about what my childhood had looked like before the men in Thornfield colors had come to our garden. I answered carefully at first, the habit of self-protection still present even when the threat had lifted, like a hand still braced against a wall that was no longer there. He noticed. He didn't comment on it directly, which was the right choice. He simply kept asking questions in that clean, unhurried way of his, and gradually the answers came out less carefully, with more of the actual texture of the memories. The silver grass fields, the low stone house, my mother's hands, always moving, mixing, measuring, tending. The way she laughed, which she did rarely but completely. The kind of laugh that took over her whole face and made her look younger than all her careful watchfulness. He listened to all of it with the quality of attention I was coming to understand as simply the way he was. Not performance, not strategy. Just presence. On the third day, he told me about Ashbourne. Not the political structure. He had briefed me on that already, efficiently and clearly, on the first evening's rest stop. He told me about the place itself. The capital, Varenthal, which sat at the base of a mountain range, so old the peaks had worn themselves smooth and gray, like old teeth. The Great Hall, which was not a throne room in the way I'd imagined throne rooms, marble and cold, and designed for intimidation, but a long, low-ceilinged space of dark wood and firelight that had been the meeting place of Ashbourne governance for 300 years. He told me about the people I would meet, his senior council, his household staff, the territorial representatives who came to Varenthal each season from the 8 Ashbourne districts, He told me about his grandmother. Not the political fact of her, not the blood right carrier, the sealed name, the 60-year regency. Her, Mira Dre, born Mira Ashbourne, who had made extraordinary preserves from the mountain berries that grew on the north slopes, and had kept a garden of medicinal herbs along the south wall of the great hall that still grew, tended now by the household staff who had loved her and were still, 60 years later, unwilling to let it go. I stopped my horse. He noticed and stopped his beside me. I looked at him. "A stone house," I said, "with a garden of medicinal herbs along the south wall." He looked at me steadily. "Yes. My mother built the same thing, in Marin's Hollow. She always said she couldn't remember where she'd gotten the idea." The mountain wind moved through the silver forest around us. We were above the tree line here, on a ridge road, and the view on both sides was enormous and gray-green and very old. He was quiet for a moment, with an expression that was not surprise, more like something that had been suspected becoming confirmed. "Your mother knew things about her own origins that she never told you," he said. Not an accusation. A careful placing of a piece. She knew exactly what she carried and exactly whose line it came from. She built what she had loved. She just couldn't explain why without explaining everything. I sat with that for a long moment. My mother, her careful hands, her deliberate obscurity, her garden of medicinal herbs that I'd thought was practicality, and had been, all along, something closer to longing. I turned my horse back to the road. "Tell me more about her," I said, and he did. Chapter 12, Varenthal. The Ashbourne capital appeared at dusk on the fourth day, exactly as he had described it, low and ancient at the base of worn gray peaks, its lights coming up one by one in the falling dark, like the settlement was waking rather than sleeping. It was not a large city. It was not built to impress from a distance. It was built to last, and it looked it, stone and dark timber, streets that followed the natural contours of the mountain rather than imposing a grid upon them, buildings that had been repaired and added to over centuries rather than torn down and replaced. It looked like a place that knew what it was and had stopped needing to prove it to anyone. I thought immediately that I understood why my grandmother had loved it. We came through the main gate at a measured pace, and I had expected, I don't know what I had expected. Some formal reception, perhaps. People lining the road. But the gate guard simply acknowledged Calum with the easy nod of people who had been watching for him, and we moved through streets where ordinary evening life was proceeding, doors open, lights spilling out, the smell of cooking fires and pine smoke. And people looked up as the escort passed, and their eyes found me with a quality of attention that was not cold or demanding. More like careful hope, like people who had been told something was coming, and were now in the delicate process of deciding whether to believe it. Sable rode up beside me as we entered the main avenue. "The household staff will receive you at the hall," she said. "Matter of fact, informational. They've been preparing since the first courier arrived. Don't be alarmed by the number of people. They're all longtime staff. None of them are strangers to the situation, and every single one of them is going to try to feed you." She said the last part with the smallest possible softening around her eyes. Not a smile exactly, but the controlled cousin of one. It was the first personal remark she had made to me in 4 days, and I held it warmly. The great hall was as he had described, long, low-ceilinged, dark wood and firelight. It smelled like pine resin and old stone, and faintly, beneath those things, something herbal and green that I recognized before I could identify it. The herb garden along the south wall, still growing, 60 years tended. I stood in the entrance for a moment and breathed it, and felt something I had no clean word for. Something that had the shape of arrival, but the texture of memory, like returning to a place you have only ever visited in a dream. The household staff was 16 people. Sable had been right. They all wanted to feed me. There was a brief, dignified, and slightly chaotic sequence of events involving a long table, more food than I had seen in 3 years combined, and 16 people all managing their feelings about my presence in the specific way of people who are professionally composed but personally overwhelmed. Were introduced, looked at it the way we're introduced, looked at it the way people look at photographs of someone they knew when they were young, and then very quietly said, "She has her grandmother's coloring." And then she turned and led me to my seat with perfect professional composure, and did not mention it again, though her hands, setting a plate in front of me, were not entirely steady. I sat at the table and I ate, really ate, warm food at a table with light and people, and the smell of that herb garden drifting in from the south wall. And for the first time in 3 years, I did not eat alone. Calum sat at the head of the table, and in this space he was different than he had been on the road, not less himself, but more settled, the way a person is more themselves in their own home than anywhere else. He ate and talked with the staff with the ease of long familiarity, knowing their names, asking after specific things that told me he tracked the details of individual lives, and the energy in the room around him was relaxed and genuine in a way that Thornfield's pack house, with all its warmth and laughter, had never been. Because that warmth had always had a center of fear. Doran's presence giving everything else its shape and temperature. This warmth had a different center. I sat and ate and watched, and I felt the last of the road tension leave my shoulders in a long, slow exhale that I hadn't known I was holding. After dinner, Petra showed me to my room. It was on the second floor, with a window that faced the mountains. The bed was real, deep and warm, with the smell of clean linen and lavender. There was a small table, a chair, a lamp already lit. On the windowsill, someone had placed a single sprig of yarrow in a thin-necked bottle of water. I stood and looked at it for a long time. Then I sat on the bed, and I opened my coat, and I reached into the inner pocket where I'd kept the cloth pouch since Thornfield, and I held it in my hands, Mattis's carved figures, the small wooden woman standing upright at the top of the pile, and I sat in the lamplight, and I let myself be somewhere safe for the first time since I was 11 years old. Chapter 13. What the Bond Knows. I had known on some level from the night he vaulted the east wall. Known it the way you know things in the body before the mind has processed them. The specific quality of recognition when his eyes had found me in the dark. The way his hand on my arm had felt less like steadying and more like something clicking into a position it had always belonged in. I had filed it away under things I was not ready to think about yet. The way you file away a letter you are not ready to open. In Varenthal, the letter began opening itself. It happened in the small ways first. The way I always knew where he was in the hall without looking. Some peripheral awareness that tracked him the way a compass tracks north, involuntary and precise. The way the air pressure in a room seemed different when he entered it, a shift I felt before I heard his footsteps. The way I slept better on the nights when he was in the hall, rather than out on the territorial business that took him away 2 or 3 days at a time. I noticed all of it. I did not speak of it. I was a woman who had survived 11 years by being very careful about what she gave away, and this was too important to be careless with. He noticed things too. I could tell, with the same peripheral certainty, the way his attention moved to me in rooms without particular reason, the way he was always positioned, without apparent effort, between me and any door, not controlling, not restricting, just present in a way that was orientated. When I had nightmares, and I had nightmares, because 3 years of what I had survived does not stop living in the body, just because the external circumstances have changed. I would wake in the small hours, and lie in the dark, and after a while I would hear, without fail, quiet footsteps pause outside my door. Never entering, never knocking, just pausing for a moment, and then moving on. He never mentioned it. I never mentioned it. We were both, I think, being very careful with each other, aware that what was between us was real, and large and fragile in the specific way that things are fragile when they are still deciding what shape they are going to take. Sable was the one who named it in the end. Not to me, to him in a conversation I was not meant to hear and heard anyway, because the hall's old stone walls carried sound in unexpected directions, and I had been sitting in the herb garden when they were in the corridor on the other side of the south wall. "You need to tell her," Sable said, with the flat practicality of someone who has watched a situation develop past the point of pretending it isn't a situation. A pause. "It's not that simple." His voice, very controlled. "She's been through—" "I know what she's been through," Sable said, "which is exactly why she deserves to know what she's feeling has a name, and that you're feeling it too, and that she is not alone in it. Again." The pause that followed that last word was long enough that I had time to understand what she meant, and to feel it land in my chest like something warm and heavy and true. Then, I know. His voice, quieter now. I know. He came to find me in the herb garden that afternoon. I was sitting on the stone bench along the south wall, where the afternoon light came in sideways and warm, and I had a book open in my lap that I'd not been reading for the past hour, because I'd been thinking about the conversation I had overheard and deciding how I felt about it. He came through the garden doorway and stopped when he saw me, and for a single unguarded second, his expression was the most undefended I had seen it, something open and certain and slightly afraid, the fear of someone who is holding something important and is aware of how easily important things break. Then he composed it and came to sit on the far end of the bench, and he was quiet for a moment, looking at the herb garden with those amber eyes. "Sable thinks I should be less careful," he said finally. "Sable," I said, "is correct." He turned to look at me. I met his eyes. Outside, through the garden's open roof, the sky was the clear, pale blue of late afternoon, and the mountain peaks were gray and smooth and very old against it, and the herbs along the south wall smelled like my mother's garden in Marin's Hollow, and I was so tired of being careful about things that deserved to be spoken aloud. "I felt you before you came through the trees," I said. "Beyond the mountains. I felt you moving through the dark. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it was coming for me specifically." I kept my eyes on his. "I know what that means. My mother told me about mate bonds. She told me everything she could that last night, because she knew she was running out of time to tell me things." He was very still. "When did you know?" I asked. Not accusatory, just needing the timeline. He was quiet for a moment. "I have known your name since I was old enough to understand what it meant," he said. "But knowing a name and knowing a person are different things. When the seal broke, when I felt it across those mountains, that was when I knew the second thing. The thing that doesn't come from bloodline records or crown law or family history." He paused. "That was when I knew you." I looked at him for a long moment. The afternoon light moved through the garden. The herbs rustled in the small mountain wind. "Say it plainly," I said. He held my gaze with those amber eyes that had found me in the dark on the worst night of my life, and he said, plainly, "You are my mate, Seraphne. You have been since before either of us chose it, and I have been trying very hard not to push something so large at a person who has spent 3 years being given no choices at all. I let that sit in the air between us, let it exist fully, in the open, where it had been trying to get for weeks. Then I said, I would like to choose it." And the expression that moved across his face at those words, quiet, complete, like a door finally opening into a room that had been prepared for a long time, was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Chapter 14. The Ashbourne Council. The council met 10 days after my arrival. 12 wolves, the senior representatives of the 8 Ashbourne districts, plus Calum's 3 senior advisors and Sable, who sat at council as head of Crown Security with the same minimal expression efficiency she brought to everything. I had met them individually in the days before the formal session. Calum had arranged it deliberately, making sure that when I walked into that room, I was not walking in among strangers. It was the kind of careful, practical thoughtfulness I was coming to understand as characteristic of him. He prepared the ground for the things that mattered. I sat at the council table in a chair that was, I was informed by Petra, with quiet significance, the chair that had been kept empty for 60 years. Not dramatically empty, not rope-cordoned or formally preserved. Simply always there, always unoccupied, the same chair at the same position at the table, as though the household had collectively agreed without discussion that it was not theirs to fill. I sat in it and placed my hands flat on the table, and I looked at the 12 faces looking back at me, and I did not perform confidence I did not have. I simply sat in the chair that had been waiting, and I let myself be looked at. The formal recognition proceedings took the better part of the morning. The Ashbourne Council operated very differently from the Thornfield environment I knew. There was debate, genuine and sometimes pointed, with council members raising questions about process and precedent and the practical implications of a 60-year regency ending and an unsealed heir of unknown preparation taking her place in Ashbourne governance. None of it was hostile. All of it was serious. I answered what I could answer honestly, and said clearly what I did not yet know, which seemed to land better with most of them than a performance of readiness would have. An older woman from the Northern District, named Helda, who had the aspect of someone who had been skeptical of most things for 60 years and had generally been correct, leaned forward at one point and asked me, "What do you know about territorial water rights?" I said, "Nothing yet, but I learn fast and I understand that what I don't know is my responsibility to remedy." She studied me. Then she sat back. "Adequate answer," she said, in a tone that suggested adequate was doing a great deal of work. I counted it as a significant victory. The vote to formally recognize my blood right claim was 10-2, the two dissenting voices being Helda and a younger representative named Corvin from the Eastern District, who had concerns about procedural timeline rather than the claim itself. Calum accepted the vote without theatrical satisfaction, moving immediately to the next agenda item, which told me something about how he governed. The win was already in the past, and there was work ahead. I watched him move through the remainder of the session, and I understood something I had been approaching gradually since Varenthal. He had not spent the past 10 days preparing me to sit in this room as a courtesy. He had been preparing me because he intended for me to actually participate in governing. Not as a symbol, not as a political checkmark, as a partner in the work. The thought settled into me with the specific weight of something that was terrifying and correct in equal measure. At the end of the session, as the council filed out, Helda paused beside my chair. She looked down at me with those 60 years skeptical eyes. "Your grandmother," she said, "once told me that the most important thing a leader can know is the difference between what they are afraid of and what they should actually be afraid of." She paused. "You seem to understand that difference already." It took her longer. She walked out before I could respond, which I suspected was deliberate. I sat alone in the council room for a moment after everyone had gone, my hands still flat on the table. The chair was solid beneath me, and the room was old and quiet, and full of the weight of decisions made here over 300 years. I pressed my palms into the table, and I felt it, the name in my blood, fully awake now, fully itself, warm and clear and present. Not a secret anymore, not a burden, a source. I sat in the chair that had been waiting 60 years, and I let myself, carefully and completely, begin to believe that I was allowed to be here. Chapter 15. What Doran Voss sent. The letter arrived 3 weeks after the council session, by formal courier bearing Thornfield's green and iron gray. It was addressed to Calum, not to me, which was itself a message, and its contents, which Calum summarized for me, with the controlled expression of someone managing their reaction to something irritating, were a formal legal challenge to the blood right ruling. Doran Voss, operating through two of the most sophisticated pack law scholars in the Northern Territories, was arguing three positions simultaneously: that the voluntary sealing constituted renouncement, that the breaking of the seal under duress was legally ambiguous in ways that the Crown Review had not adequately examined, and, most pointedly, that the 60-year regency had created governance rights that could not be dissolved by bloodline claim alone without proof of administrative capacity. It was, Calum said, a well-constructed document. It was also, he said, what a very intelligent man did when he had lost and was not ready to stop playing. He placed it on the table between us. "He's not wrong that the administrative capacity argument has legal standing," he said, watching me read. "It's a weak argument, but it exists. The historical records include 2 cases where blood right claimants were found unable to demonstrate sufficient understanding of the governance they were inheriting." He paused. His scholars found those records. They were hoping I hadn't. I read the letter twice. I placed it down. I thought about Doran Voss, patient, calculating, always several moves ahead, willing to wait years for an outcome he had decided upon. I thought about the 3 years I had spent in his yard and his basement and his cold storage room, counting blows because it was the only power available to me. And I thought about the council session, and Helda's 60-year skeptical eyes, and the chair that had been empty and was not empty anymore. "He needs me to be unprepared," I said. "That's the whole argument. If I'm not ready to govern, the administrative capacity precedent becomes viable, and he can drag the proceedings long enough to create real legal uncertainty." I looked at Calum. "How long do I have before the challenge requires formal response?" 60 days, he said, by which time, under normal circumstances, a new heir would still be in early orientation. He said it without emphasis, just placing the piece. I looked at him for a moment. "Then we don't operate under normal circumstances," I said. teach me everything. What followed was the most concentrated 45 days of my life. Calum taught me, not alone, but with his counsel and his advisors, and Helda, who appeared at my study door on the fourth morning with a stack of territorial water rights documents and the expression of someone who has decided, against their better judgment, to invest in something. She sat across from me, and she taught me water rights with the same flat precision she brought to everything, and when I made errors, she identified them without softening, and when I grasped something quickly, she acknowledged it with the Helda equivalent of enthusiasm, which was a very small nod. I studied pack law, crown law, the 60-year history of the Regency and its decisions, the 8 districts' individual concerns and histories, the territorial agreements that had been holding since before Calum's grandfather's time and required renewal, and the ones that were quietly fraying and needed attention. I slept less. I ate at my desk. I moved through the hall with documents under my arm and ink on my fingers, and the focused energy of someone who has realized that the most powerful form of revenge available to them is competence. Calum watched all of this with an expression that he did not make obvious, but that I caught, in passing glances and over the edge of documents late at night in the hall. Something steady and warm and entirely specific to me, the way a fire in a room is warm, but also clearly oriented toward the person it is burning for. He brought me tea at hours when I had forgotten to eat. He sat across the study table and worked his own governance while I worked mine, and the silence we kept together was the most comfortable silence I had ever inhabited, full and alive in the way that silence is when the person keeping it with you is someone you could talk to endlessly and are choosing not to, simply because the quiet is also a form of being together. On the 40th night, he looked up from his documents and found me looking at him, and he said quietly, "You are going to be extraordinary at this." Not encouraging, not rallying, just stating a fact he had already established. I looked back at him and I said, "I know." And the small sound he made, not quite a laugh, something quieter, was the warmest thing in the room. Chapter 16, The New Power. Watching on the 43rd day, Sable came to my study with her controlled face, carrying something I'd not seen in it before. Not alarm, she was constitutionally resistant to alarm, but a quality of heightened attention that on any other face would have been concern. She placed a single report on my desk. 3 sentences. A delegation of 7 wolves had been sighted on the Ashbourne eastern border, bearing no colors of any recognized pack or territory. They had not crossed. They had simply stopped at the border, remained for 3 hours, and departed. Their direction of departure suggested they had come from the far eastern territories, lands that Ashbourne's records designated as unaffiliated, unmapped, outside the current territorial agreements. Unaffiliated eastern wolves did not simply appear at Ashbourne's border to observe and leave. I read the 3 sentences. I read them again. I looked at Sable. "This isn't connected to Doran's legal challenge," I said. She held my gaze. "No," she said. "It isn't. Someone else knows the seal broke. Someone else has known for longer than you'd be comfortable with," she said. "We have been aware of Eastern interest in the Ashbourne bloodline for several years. We did not know how specific that interest was until now." I set the report down. Outside my window, the gray mountain peaks were darkening toward evening, smooth and worn and very old against the sky. "Who are they?" She was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, choosing. "There is an old name," she said, "in the Eastern records. A line that has a competing interpretation of blood right authority. Not Ashbourne. Something older. Something that has been waiting, the way Ashbourne has been waiting, for the right moment to make a claim of its own." The room was very quiet. I thought about Doran Voss and his years of calculated patience, and I understood suddenly that Doran Voss was a small piece on a much larger board, and that what had broken open the night I stopped getting up in that Thornfield yard had announced itself not just to Calum, but to everyone in this world who had been listening for exactly that sound. I carried the report to Calum. He read it with the stillness of someone processing something they had half expected and had hoped, in the unreasonable human way, would not arrive. He set it down. He looked at me. "I need to tell you something I should have told you earlier," he said. "Not because I was hiding it, because I wanted you to have time to arrive before the next thing tried to take the arriving away from you." He looked at the report. "The Eastern Line is real. It predates Ashbourne. It has its own blood right tradition, its own heir, and its own argument for primacy over the Western territories." He paused. "And the specific thing they want is not the seat. It is not the claim. What the Eastern Line has always wanted, in every generation it has surfaced, is an alliance, through bonding, with an Ashbourne heir." The word bonding sat in the air between us and acquired a specific weight. I looked at him. "They want to approach me." He met my eyes. "They are coming to approach you, whether we are ready or not." I looked at him for a long moment, at the amber eyes that had moved through the dark toward me on the worst night of my life, that had found me without searching, because they already knew where I was. "Then we will be ready," I said. He held my gaze, and in it was everything that did not need to be said. The mate bond, the weeks of quiet study beside each other, the tea brought at forgotten hours, all of it present in the space between us like a foundation that had been laid before we understood what we were building on it. "Yes," he said, "we will." Chapter 17, 60 Days. The formal response to Doran Voss's legal challenge was submitted on the 58th day, 2 days early, which I was told was a statement in itself. 17 documents prepared with the Ashbourne Legal Counsel and reviewed by Helda, who contributed 12 amendments and the kind of precisely targeted marginalia that suggested she had found the process, against all previous indications, genuinely enjoyable. The response addressed every argument Voss's scholars had raised, including the administrative capacity precedent, which we dismantled with documentation, formal council session minutes, territorial assessment records, district correspondence, 45 days of work presented as evidence not of preparation, but of participation. Actual governance, already in progress. The legal challenge, Calum's senior advisor told me when the submission had gone, would not survive its first formal review. It would be withdrawn or dismissed within 90 days. I received the news in the herb garden, Calum's grandmother's herb garden, along the south wall, in the afternoon light. Calum came to tell me himself rather than sending word, which I had stopped being surprised by. He sat beside me on the stone bench and told me, and I sat with it for a moment, and then I looked at the herbs growing along the wall that had been tended for 60 years by people who had loved the woman who planted them. I thought about my mother, her hands in her own herb garden, her careful obscurity, the name she had pressed to my ear with her last breath. I thought about what she had given me, and what it had cost her, and what it had cost me, and what it had finally become. "She would be proud," Calum said quietly. He did not say it the way people say things to comfort. He said it the way he said everything, as a fact he had examined and found accurate. I looked at him. "I know," I said. And I did know. I had known it in the moment Mattis Howard had placed that last carved figure in my hand in the Thornfield yard, and I had known it every day since, in the way you know things that live below the level of doubt. He reached across the bench and placed his hand over mine, the same hand that had steadied me over the east wall on the worst night of my life. He didn't grip, just covered, present, not imposed. The afternoon light fell sideways through the garden the way amber light falls sideways through a western window on a particular kind of evening, and I thought, my mother sat in this quality of light and told me what I was carrying, and I sat in Thornfield dirt in a light that was the color of a wound, and now I am sitting in a garden that my grandmother planted and that has been tended for 60 years by people who kept faith with what she left behind, and there is a man beside me whose hand is over mine, and whose amber eyes have known my name since before I knew what the name meant. I turned my hand over and held his. The mountain wind moved through the garden. The herbs rustled. From inside the hall came the sound of Petra directing some household operation with the precision she brought to everything, and far off in the city the sound of ordinary evening beginning, doors, voices, the smell of cooking fires. I had been surviving for 11 years. This, the held hand, the garden, the amber light, the ordinary evening sounds of a place that had been waiting for me. This was what living felt like. I let myself know it fully. I let myself have it. Chapter 18. The bonding. It was not dramatic. That was the part I had not anticipated. That the thing I had been carrying all my life, the thing that had cost me everything it cost me, would resolve itself not in ceremony or declaration, or some great culminating moment, but quietly, in the herb garden, in the late afternoon, with his hand over mine, and the mountain wind moving through the plants my grandmother had loved. The mate bond, when we finally let it fully exist between us, when I looked at him and said simply, "I'm ready if you are." And he looked back at me with those amber eyes and said, "I have been ready since the night I heard the seal break." The bond completing felt less like an event and more like a recognition. A door that had been standing open for weeks finally acknowledged as open. A warmth that had been present since a dark yard, and a man vaulting a wall, choosing to stop pretending it was something other than what it was. He pressed his forehead to mine, and we sat like that for a long time without speaking. In the garden that had been tended 60 years for this specific eventual moment of someone coming home to it, and I felt the bond settle into my blood alongside the name. Both of them awake now, both of them fully themselves. The ancient bloodline and the ancient animal thing that had chosen us for each other existing in me simultaneously, like two fires burning from the same source. His thumb moved across my knuckles. I closed my eyes. Outside the garden walls, Varenthal was proceeding with its evening, ordinary and alive, entirely unaware that something that had been unfinished for 60 years had just finished itself quietly in an herb garden in the late afternoon light. We came back inside when the light had gone fully golden, and Petra took one look at us from across the hall and set down what she was holding and pressed both hands flat against her heart and said nothing at all, which was the most she had ever said. "There is a name inside me. Not the sealed name. That name is awake now, fully alive in my blood, burning clean and clear and entirely itself. Not the name I was given. Seraphne Lowe, the name that survived 11 years of being buried and protected and pressed to a dying woman's ear in a stone house in Marin's Hollow. A third name. The name I have only just begun to grow into. Not given to me by bloodline or by birth. Not whispered in darkness or carved in legal record, but chosen. The name of a woman who stood up 73 times and then stopped getting up and found that the stopping was not the ending, but the beginning. The name of a woman who stood at the top of a mountain pass and looked at a kingdom that had been waiting and understood that waiting and arriving are not opposites, that the destination was always there, that it was the surviving that took so long. I speak all my names now, freely, in the open, in the herb garden my grandmother planted, and in the council hall, and in the quiet late-night study, with my hand in his, and ink on my fingers, and the name in my blood burning warm. I speak them to the Council of 12, and to Helda's 60-year skeptical eyes, and to Petra, who still sometimes looks at my face and goes briefly elsewhere. I speak them to Thessaly Voss, who has begun corresponding with me. Careful, precise letters that are working their way, slowly, towards something that might eventually be called friendship. I speak them to the eastern border, where 7 wolves without colors have been seen twice more, and where something old and patient is watching and waiting for its moment. We are watching too. We are not afraid of what is coming. We are ready for it, in the way that people are ready when they have done the work, and know the ground beneath them and are not standing alone. I walked into the herb garden this morning before the council session, in the thin early light, and I stood at the south wall and pressed my hand to the stone the way I used to press my hand to the east wall in Thornfield. Not looking for support, just contact. Just the feeling of something solid. The herbs along the wall were growing toward the light, the way they always do, the way they have done for 60 years. I thought about my mother. I thought about the night she poured 2 cups of tea and told me I was carrying something older than any of us fully understood. I thought about the red sky and the dirt and the name rising through me like smoke through still air on the night I finally stopped getting up. She had not given me a burden. She had given me a destination. I arrived. Thank you for every comment, every country, every timestamp you've left below this story. Whether you found part 1 at midnight or this ending at sunrise, I see you wherever in the world you are. If this story meant something to you, Share it with someone who needs to hear that the night everything breaks is sometimes the night everything finally begins. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next story. End of part 2.